This is my video response to me, Mr. Mayo's video regarding why I don't listen to modern day music. And speaking for myself, I'm like me and Mr. Mayo a lot. I was born at the end of the 60s, 1969, but didn't really understand music or what have you till about the mid to late 70s when I got 5 or so older, and my parents would play contemporary music in the car off the radio. I'd hear it a lot, so that kind of thing just resonated with me over time. People like music, oldies music preferably. A lot of us middle-aged people do. Not saying that middle-aged people don't listen to today's music, but a lot of the older music that they grew up listening to resonates with them, whether it's the 60s or 70s or the 80s or the 90s. Just depends. And whatever they want to listen to, should be their prerogative. Just because they don't listen to 2000, 2010 to 2020, what have you, music shouldn't make them an outcast. It's just what you like to listen to. Back when I was a teenager, my dad had the Let It Be album by the Beatles, and I really didn't know who the Beatles were because I was 12, 13 years old. I didn't really know who they were. He said, "Here, just listen to this." I listened to that album over and over and over again, and for being a teenager, I was just hooked. I didn't say, "Well, these guys are has-beens." This is your generation, not mine. Type of music, and so once I listened to that album, I started exploring this band, but way before the internet ever existed, and I went to the library, got a book on the Beatles, learned some more about them, bought some of their albums back when you could buy vinyl, in the record stores, and I had a couple of neighbors that actually had Beatles albums, vintage Beatles albums, and they were friends of my youngest brother, so that played with their son, so they let me borrow their albums. We live across the street, so I'd go over there like a freaking library. I just go over and pick out what I want to listen to and play it on my record player, and sometimes record it on the cassette tapes, and whatnot. But and then generally, I had a friend that used to make fun of me because I listened to the Beatles. He used to call them has-beens. "Oh, you listen to those has-beens. Well, you listen to today's music." And I wasn't really heavy into the 80s music because the new wave came along, and I just didn't really care for it. But it wasn't just new wave music. There was other bands out there I did like metal bands that I listened to on MTV. Rod Stewart, 80s Rod Stewart, and that kind of thing. And yeah, I listened to some modern day music at the time, when you can consider it modern day at that point, but I still went back into the oldies music, and so I was like more being a throwback because I liked it and it resonated with me. Different people like different genres of music, just because today I listen, today music is not really music anymore. I mean, a friend of mine plays it on the radio at work, and a lot of what he listens to is just, I'm not going to say it's garbage, but it's just, I don't know, it's just like, it ain't really music. It's more about fashion. It's more about beat and rhythm. It ain't melody. It's like today's music just doesn't have anything to say anymore. Like it's all already, like it's all have been, it has, how do I put it? It's all been done before. And there's really no vision because it's all been done before. I mean, you think about it. In the 50s, you had the beginning of rock and roll. In the 60s, You had in the 50s you had Elvis, you had Little Richard, and then all these other folks. And then in the 60s you had the Beatles, you had the Dave Clark Five, you had the Rolling Stones, you know. And then in the late 60s you had Creedence Clearwater Revival, which is probably one of the best American bands there are, although they were short-lived. But and in the 70s you had singers and songwriters come along. The hippie generation had phased out when you get into the mid-70s. And you had the singers and the songwriters. In the late 70s, you had that trash called disco that everybody eventually hated, but at the time everybody accepted. But there was some disco music that was okay. I mean, you can't discount it all. You know, and in the 80s, you had the new wave, which came out of disco. And then you got metal music in the 80s, metal hair bands throughout the 80s. And in the 90s you had grunge that came along. So there was just different steps of music that progressed over the decades, but I don't know what you want to call it now. I mean, if you get criticized for maybe not liking today's music as much, or don't take it in as much as you do, the stuff that we grew up with, because we're not that young generation anymore. Now, young folks nowadays, teenagers, when they're coming along, and they come along into this phase of music, if you want to call it that, we're still listening to stuff we grew up listening to, because that's what we're accustomed to, and that's what we're inbred with, because that's all we've heard. And it's hard to accept something else, because it's like, this music sounds like this. It don't sound that good. It's just a bunch of, even the music don't even sound real. But you go back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, it's more like music. You got guitars, you got drums, you got, a vocalist, you got a song that says something, that means something, that's pushing out a message. Not just folks that just dance around on stage wearing their pretty little costumes and stuff and putting on a show. That's not rock music. And you got some teenagers up there, Justin Bieber and stuff, that go up there and they try to be 20 years old. They try to be 25 years old. They try to be grown up. They don't impress me. They're just a boy band, as Mr.Mayo was talking about before, about these boy bands. Justin Bieber is nothing but a boy band. He's just a face up there, a meal ticket for his parents. That's all he is. That's all he is. And he's gonna wind up like what's that crazy woman's name? Miley Cyrus. He's already one of a junkie, and both of them are junkies. Because they can't handle it. But I'm getting off track here. But basically, the Beatles, I didn't grow up listening to the Beatles because I was born right at the end of the 60s. But my dad introduced me to their music, and I was hooked on it ever since. And I still am. And the Beatles, to me, is what I call my anchor band. It's my anchor band that I admire a lot, because they were so creative, and they had different styles of music within the group. You had John Lennon's rock and roll. He had Paul McCartney's ballad love songs, which is nothing wrong with that. And he had some rock music, some rockers that he wrote. George Harrison, he was different. He was really innovative in different kinds of music. When he had the sitar, he added a little spice to the group, a little difference. Ringo, he wrote a couple of songs, but they were all unique in their own way. I would say my next band in line that I like is Creedence Clearwater Revival. Badfinger was really a great group. They were like Beatlesque. They were I don't know if they were trying to be the Beatles, but they were like them. They all sang and contributed to the albums. I like some 80s music depending on what it is. I'm not the type person to just, you know, if I like a song, I'll go online and find it, you know, rip it off of YouTube or whatever. If I like that song, if I like a song by, oh, I don't know, Bruce Springsteen, you know, I wouldn't go run out and buy a Bruce Springsteen album, but I would go out and buy the song I like from Bruce Springsteen, because there's nothing wrong with that. I like some 80s metal bands I grew up listening to. You know, like Dokken and 80s Kiss and you know, little Skid Row. You know, but would I go out and buy a Skid Row album? Probably not. But I would buy the song I heard because I liked the song, and I would take that song and I would put it on my MP3 player. This little gizmo right here, if anybody knows what it is, and take it with me wherever I go. You know, and I like 70s music. I like that song by Sammy Johns called Chevy Van. You know, I like the 70s Beatles solo albums. I like some of John Fogerty's solo music, 70s and 80s, and I think the 90s. He came out with Blue Moon Swamp. Really great album. He hadn't changed. I like it. I think John Fogerty is a really great artist and really hanging in there. So, you know, basically, modern day music shouldn't be looked down upon. You know, like I said, the younger generation coming along, it might appeal to them. You may get people, young people, if you sat them down and put a modern day album they like on, and then at the same time you take a Beatles CD and pop it in the CD player and play it for them, they may or may not like it. They may think, well, that's, you know, your generation or what have you. And then again, it might appeal to them, you know. So, you know, basically, you know, people shouldn't be downed because they don't care for today's music. I particularly don't. And like Mr. Mayo, that's what, like you were saying, how music today is so isolated. And you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. MTV back in the 80s, before it went to garbage TV, I was an MTV addict. And music was out there. Sit there and watch MTV and you see a music video. Oh, that's a great song. I want to go out and buy that 45. What about now? Where's the music now? If you hear it on the radio, if you listen to the radio stations that play more modern day music, and you hear a song by someone, and you think, wow, that's a great song, but I can't go out and buy the 45. They don't print them anymore. What am I going to do? I'm going on the internet, Google their name. You know, if I find out who they are, Google their name, Google the song, and see if I can download it from somewhere off of a website or what have you, or go on YouTube and maybe they made a video for that song, and then, you know, and use the MP3 YouTube converter and rip the audio and put it, you know, and stick it on this thing so we can listen to it. Because that's all you're going to get. It ain't like our generation. I watch MTV and let's say you know, I hear a song, Cyndi Lauper, Time After Time, a beautiful song. When I was a teenager, I loved that video. I had to watch that video. She came on, I had to watch it. And if I wanted to go out and buy the 45, I go out and buy the 45 because I know it'll be there. But it's not there anymore. It's isolated. Like, who are these folks? Where did they come from? You know? And then really, if you listen to today's music, it doesn't have the melody anymore. You don't have melody anymore. It doesn't have a message so much anymore. It's just whatever they can get out of you. I like a little country. I'm not a real big country and western fan, but I like a little bit of country music. A little bit of oldies music. I like a little bit of Waylon. Waylon Jennings was just a legend in his own right. And Mr. Mayo, you were talking about Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash was the man. Johnny Cash was it. I don't listen to a lot of Johnny Cash. I'll listen to a couple songs that that I like from Johnny Cash. I wouldn't buy an album. That's just me. That's just me. I got a Johnny Lee LP, Looking for Love, that he put out in 1980 country music. Country music in 1980 was just awesome. Juice Newton, I like a couple of her songs. I like a little bit of Charlie Daniels. I'm not a real big country fan. I mean, there's nothing wrong with country music. Everybody to each his own. But me being brought up, my mom listened to country music when I was growing up. But a lot of the music I heard, let's say out in the wild, like on the radio, was contemporary music, was rock music, was metal music. In the 80s, growing up, all I listened to was rock music and contemporary music. So, it kind of gets instilled in you. That's what you like. It's just like this. I like ginger ale. I like Pepsi. I like Coca-Cola. Well, I don't like Coke too much anymore, but Canada Dry. Not a lot of people like ginger ale. It doesn't mean I don't want to discount them because, hey, you don't like ginger ale? Well, why don't you like ginger ale? What's wrong with ginger ale? I like Pepsi. I may not like Coke. I may not like Dr. Pepper. I may not like Diet Right or what have you. But there's nothing wrong with me because I don't drink that. I just like ginger ale. All right, here we go. I just like the ginger ale. I like it. It's easier on my stomach. I like it. This and Pepsi. This is probably two things I drink outside of sweet tea. And folks down here in the South, we drink sweet tea. Nothing against unsweet tea, but sweet tea, that's what I drink. But no, usually I don't drink sweet tea, but at dinner time when I'm eating something. But and I'll go on to say this. Back in the 80s, I liked the Christian rock metal band Striper. And some of y'all might know who that is. Yellow and Black. And they got attacked by the Christian folks for looking like rock stars, and they didn't like it. Bad image. Blah. But I bought it. Well, I got on download. I downloaded a couple of their albums they had put out in the last couple of years. They don't sound like they did in the 80s. Not saying they should, but it's like there's a totally different sound. And it's funny. I loved them in the 80s, but when they came back, they broke up and they got back together years later, same members and everything. But it was just because it's a twist on their music now. Because I guess they're just trying to sound modern day. And they're just, to me, yeah, they're the same four people, but it ain't really, the music doesn't really sound the same like what I'm accustomed to, what I'm used to. And I think I listened to the album maybe twice. And that was it. Paul McCartney. A lot of people like modern day Paul McCartney. Now, ain't nothing wrong with Paul McCartney. He's a very talented man. I like his 70s solo music. And I get to about 82, and after that I lose it. I just lose it. I just don't follow. I heard his album New. A lot of people like it. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with it. But he sounds modern day. Real modern day. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because he's trying to appeal to the audience of today, the young folks of today. And a lot of people, follow him. you know, through, you know, that grew up listening to them, and still like listening to them. I mean, the album was fine, it was okay, but, you know, it just didn't catch me. I just didn't really catch on. You know, maybe that's me. Maybe that's Beatleman 69. Maybe that's me. Maybe that's how I feel about it. You know, and there's nothing wrong with it. Joe, I know you like Paul McCartney's New, and that's fine. I mean, that's cool, you know, great, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't down anybody for listening to today's music, but I'm going to make this one little, mention this one more thing here, for this video gets way too long, because I'm just rambling. One time I was listening to Sirius XM radio. I got that in my car. I love it. I love it. I'll never trade anything for it. It got 60s on 6, 60s on, you know, 70s on 7, and, you know, sometimes I flip over to the 80s on 8, and I listen to Hair Nation, which is hair metal from the 80s up to around 90, 91, about where they cross over, and that's about it. I love listening to it. I would never give nothing for satellite radio. I'd never give it back. It's just beautiful. Beautiful thing they come up with. No commercials either for music. Anyway, they had a request show on 60s on 6. And the guy said, the DJ, you know, she called in, request a song. I don't really remember which one it was. She said, the DJ said, "You sound awfully young. How old are you?" She said, she was young. I think she was 16, something to that nature. And he said, "Well, what made you want to listen to 60s on 6? You know, the 60s, you know, these old music. What makes you want to listen to this?" You know, I was just asking, you know, it was just interesting. Well, my dad listens to it in the car a lot on here on the XM radio, and he listens to it at home, I guess, on his albums or what have you. And she made the comment to him. Now, this is a few years ago now, several years ago now. But she made a comment. "Well, you know, today's music is garbage." That was her word. She told the DJ, and this was a young person. "Today's music is garbage." So, I mean, that's what she said. You know, and I'm not saying it's garbage because I don't really listen to it. I can't judge it. But I don't like it. I just don't. The music ain't right. You know, like I said, it's all been done before. And where else is there to go? And one more thing here, because my video's getting kind of long. You mentioned rap, Mr. Mayo. I can't stand it either. I couldn't stand it when it came out back in the 80s. I couldn't stand it. I just didn't understand it. I couldn't, you know, it just sounded like a bunch of, I don't know what you want to call it, you know. And I really didn't like it. Still don't. And it's gotten worse, I think. But back in the 80s, yeah, it was, you know, they say rock music's got a lot of rebellion in it, heavy metal music. Of course it does. I think it probably all does to some extent. I think rap is even worse. I mean, it's gotten worse. It's gotten horrible. I mean, I'll be at a traffic light, and there'll be some fella, you know, black fella, young person, dude, whatever, have the windows down and have that thing just going and saying, you know, racial epithets and curse words. I mean, and this and that, and, you know, I don't need to hear that. And how's that talent? You know, where has the record industry have gone? They just gone off the rails. If they would employ people doing that, you know. So anyway, this is just my rant, and my response to you, Mr. Mayo, about listening to oldies music versus the modern day music. I hope I made some good points on this video, and it's been a while since I made a video, so maybe I'll make some more coming up. I got to think some really good ideas, because sometimes, you know, doing albums and stuff gets a little, you know, a little redundant, you know, and then here we go again, you know, thing. But I enjoy your videos and everything, and I'll probably come up with some here in the near future. So anyway, this is my little contribution to the response to your video. So I hope you enjoyed this and got something out of it. So for right now, Beetleman69 signing off. Peace and love.